Hi, this is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow a great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite.
Meredith Moore, founder and CEO of Artisan Financial Strategies in Alpharetta, Georgia, is both advisor and entrepreneur with an out-of-the-box story. This self-described growth junkie is a financial guru, speaker, thought leader, and mentor to an inspiring group of diverse next-gen talent within her own firm and community. Meredith is a proud graduate of Leadership Atlanta, a community education program targeted at young professionals, which hosts an annual women's forum where Meredith has had the honor of speaking and moderating. Meredith knows community is everything, and her determination and drive earned her the prestigious 2018 Greater North Fulton Chamber Businesswomen of Excellence Award, among other notable achievements, leadership and board positions, including being recognized by NAFA Atlanta, the Atlanta Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. Honors aside, this accomplished financial advisor thinks of herself as a business owner first and has put forth the grit and the guts to join study groups and masterminds outside and inside the industry to learn from some of the best, like Coach Joe Lucas, founder of the Magellan Mastermind and Practice Management industry gurus, Angie Herbers and Stephanie Bogan. Meredith also sits down one-on-one each year with Dory Clark, one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world, to do her own business and audacious goal planning once a year. She's also a diehard integrator of the entrepreneurial operating system, who started her career in financial services with a bachelor's of industrial and systems engineering from Georgia Tech. Talk about out of the box. Not surprising, there are many emerging themes in this interview with Meredith Moore and fascinating insights into her work with women breadwinners. She also gets personal and vulnerable too. In fact, one of the many gifts you'll discover in this episode with Meredith Moore is the power of her perseverance. Meredith is an absolute inspiration when it comes to fighting for her life and her business. Having been diagnosed with brain cancer just 6 weeks after having her son, she knew that her only option was to become a fighter and to be more driven than ever before. Fast forward 16 years later, through being a fighter within all aspects of her life, she knows that setting bold, audacious goals for yourself and grinding it out is something that can be found in the suite. Meredith Moore, take a seat in the suite. It is awesome, so awesome to see you today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be able to hang out with you, Tina. So all good stuff.
Great. And for our listening audience here, Meredith is such a real pro. Like, she had a podcast before podcasts were like a thing. She's also been a guest on the Wall Street Journal podcast. So you all are in for a mighty, mighty treat. Let's just start with her Twitter handle, because too, it's also really cool, Financial Girl. And so Meredith Moore is a financial guru, a speaker, a writer, a leader, a growth junkie, right? We're both Dory Clark followers.
Let's call it what it is, Tina. We're both fangirls.
Exactly. Total fangirls. And now you're in Alpharetta, Georgia. I love that area, by the way. You know, it's really happening. There's such a great vibe over there. And you are founder and CEO of Artisan Financial Strategies, and you're helping Atlanta families coordinate their financial world. So, you know, let's start there. You were voted 2018 the Greater North Fulton Chamber Business Women of Excellence. You do so much in the community. So let's start there.
Sure. So I guess as context for political junkies, I live in Fulton County. So for those people that are familiar with Fulton County since the election. So in North Fulton, that's more of a regional community. And while I live in North Fulton, I'm very involved in town Atlanta too. And in fact, I'm a proud graduate of Leadership Atlanta, which was the first sort of leadership program with all the municipalities that sort of came out of the civil rights era, literally in the 60s, was how that came about. So yes, I do step up in North Fulton. And so I was excited to get that award several years ago. But like everybody probably that listens to your podcast, we all have awards and what I call necessary social proof. But, as it pertains to women, Tina, and I think you know this, like my passion is around mentoring. And that's what really, gets me going. And I mentor a lot of other women advisors, male advisors too. But I think it's a big part in our industry to be able to give back. And I mentor women too that aren't necessarily in advisory, but do a lot in advisory.
It's really interesting. I think, mentorship has been a common theme here in the suite around how women rise from one level of leadership in an organization to another. So what are you finding right now in terms of mentoring?
So, I think I'll first say that for me, I became really interested in it because I didn't have any mentors. And in fact, when I came in this industry, everybody's like, what are you doing? You went to Georgia Tech, you have an undergrad in engineering. My parents were appalled. And, I started on more of the traditional life insurance side. And it was all old white guys that didn't necessarily have my educational background. And I'm an out of the box kind of chick to begin with. And so I wasn't able to connect in the right way with a lot of people in the industry and didn't, get on the right track, like pun intended here, quick enough. Yeah. So it's like frustrating looking back, but that was my journey. And, even now, I have mentors, but they're not necessarily in advisory. I'm in study groups, I'm in masterminds in advisory, but, it's the story of the industry. There just aren't many women. So in answer to your question, like, what am I seeing? I think women, I hear this phrase a lot. And by the way, it drives me nuts. So like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I've heard that for years in advisory. And actually, because of some of my mentors, I did learn to reinvent the wheel. Like, it's okay to innovate and go with your gut, because sometimes we get these biases in our space that you're supposed to do things this very specific way.
Right.
It's like back to the 90s and in the 2000s, like you do dinner seminars and everybody's emulating everybody else because nobody wants to reinvent the wheel. And so back to, I'm challenging people that I'm working with to lean into being yourself and figure out what makes sense. Like, take out everything you know about advisory or what you know about your business and think about it out of the box. And actually, Dory Clark helped me a lot with that, because I think, we've been told for years to niche. 10, 15 years, that's been like the hot topic. And whether it's advisor or other businesses, everybody's scared to niche out of sort of a scarcity mindset. And I needed that push and to be at the cliff to say, if you want to be able to scale a business in the right way, be yourself and do it in an unadulterated fashion.
Right.
And start going with your gut. And then from there, you start to figure things out. So I hear the phrase a lot, I'm building the plane while I'm flying it.
Yep, exactly. I love that expression. You and I have so much in common too. And I think that's why, like, from the first time that we met, we just like jive. We could have just sat there for the entire night and just talked and had wine and just, everything about the industry, before the industry. And what I found fascinating, and I love the expression that, yes, reinvent the wheel. you and I both came from your mastermind. We were in sister masterminds without even knowing it, right? You were in Dory Clark's mastermind. I was in Danny Eeney's mastermind. And I did exactly what you said, Meredith. I picked a mastermind outside of the industry on purpose. It was intentional because I said, okay, I want to get this view of what's possible, right? Forget about like compliance, forget about the industry, forget about like everything has to be done a certain way. I'm like, what's possible if anything's possible? And then take that, bring it to the industry, and then figure out how to do it in like a compliant way. And so what was your big takeaway from your mastermind?
Yeah, so let me back up first to say I'm also in a mastermind with Coach Joe Lucas, which began the evolution of this. Like, I don't know that I would have been ready for Dory had I not. I've been working with Coach Joe for 5 years, but I'm sitting in Joe's mastermind. Of course, it's all guys, all male advisors at the table, and we're talking about niching. And I'm like, well, I'm really thinking about this women breadwinners thing. Nobody's doing anything with it. And it was really scary. And a couple of the guys, what sparked it is one of the guys in there said, you know what, when we all went around and shared a problem, he said, none of my clients would ever hire you. And I was like shocked because like I know from sharing in that group that we have a very concierge boutique practice. And, I felt like we're doing things a lot better than these guys. He said it has nothing to do with professional. It's just like who you are. They're not going to hire a woman, and they're not going to hire a woman that, is in leadership, and that's going to intimidate people. So that was step one. And so then I was doing actually my RAA conference. I signed up. This is totally out of my periphery of something that I would do. I signed up for Dory's Recognized Expert online course. And I was like, this is really strange. And then like a Facebook group post went out saying, hey, we have this mastermind opening. And I thought, well, what the hell? I might as well go ahead and sign up for that too. Emailed Dory, got in. So when I went there, like I didn't know what to expect. Fly to New York. 3 of those people had 2 Ivy degrees. And I'm like, I just have an undergrad from Georgia Tech and started an advisory practice. These are all major consultants. And that has nothing to do with advisory whatsoever. And so that's where I really got challenged on a lot of different things. And to your point, I didn't want them to know anything about advisory because it would help vet my ideas even better. Again, no biases.
Right.
And Dory's really good about challenging you. I still consult with her once a year on my annual plan. And I want to know where my gaps are. Like, what am I missing? And she always comes in. I'm like questioning. I'm like getting ready to write a big old check each year. And every single time she gives me like 3 or 4 key things. And it's a 3-hour session. And I'm like, okay, that was worth it every single time.
That's so, so cool. So I guess the big takeaway for everyone listening here is to step out of the box, and there's nothing wrong with building the plane, flying it, and, hitting a little turbulence along the way, right? As long as we stay in the air, that's it. And there's lots of ways to do it. And it's interesting that I hear you talking about how you arrived at Dory's mastermind because, hey, an engineering degree from Georgia Tech is nothing to sneeze at either. And since that time, you've spoken at the Wall Street Journal's Women in Workplace on Wall Street Journal's Secret of Women's Wealth podcast. You're also a contributor to Medium, Thrive Global, who is Ariana Huffington, who I saw speak, who was amazing. I saw her at a HubSpot conference. How do you make a leap from engineering to financial services, and why did you do it?
Yeah, so my story was, again, a little out of the box. I knew I was an entrepreneur. I think not just because I didn't really love my academic work. I'm not an academic kind of person. I can do well, but I had started getting into leadership very early on while I was at Tech running various events. And I'm like, you know what? And I had fundraised. essentially for certain events and helped run many businesses with these events. And that's when I came to this realization that I'm more of an entrepreneur. But in the late 90s, the idea of entrepreneurship was buying a Subway franchise. So advisory kind of came across, my feet, and I did some interviews. And again, it was more on the insurance side. And it resonated because I felt I could build a better mousetrap. And at that time, again, in a traditional life insurance side, God, this sounds elitist, but I'm just going to go there with you. Like, I felt I was smarter than most of those people and that I could figure it out. And if there was time to take risk, because you eat what you kill, not walking into any happy salary, it was to do it then, because I was 23. And, just started figuring out I didn't have any big natural market. My family certainly didn't give me any money to manage or didn't go buy policies. So I had to grind it out with the best of them, no matter what my family background had been. And I kept figuring it out. And one thing, though, I will tell you is I look back, I wished, I'm a big believer we're the average of the 5 people we surround ourselves with the most.
Me too.
Yep. And
reading the same books. We're following the same things.
Yep.
We're on the similar paths here.
Yeah. But you know what? I wasn't surrounding myself with the right people then.
Wow.
And it's back to I didn't have mentors. Maybe that was a good thing. And I wish somebody had said, you need to figure out how to get yourself in circles where people were more ambitious about what they wanted, more goal oriented, instead of, just bullpen it and grinding the way that I did. I don't regret that, but, we all look back and say, hey, well, I could have done this, and this different.
Yeah.
And so now when I mentor, always look at who do you surround yourself with? And in our industry, that happens to be how we also make rain.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hang around, plumbers all day long, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those guys can have really good income. That's where you're going to probably do business. And parts of that, it's going to be who you identify with, which is why when I niched to female breadwinners, I launched an event, and it went virtual, obviously with everything going on. And it's a luncheon for women in senior leadership. And it's called Interesting Women Leaders in the ATL.
Oh, cool.
So it's all C-suite and women in senior leadership. And my heart is in being a connector. And so we get some absolute rock stars, and I moderate a conversation around goals and wins. And, I really focus on the caliber of the person in there because it elevates these conversations. So selfishly, I do this for myself because it's surrounding myself with the right people, emotionally and with goals. But professionally, I need to be hanging out in that crowd too, because it aligns with my niche.
So what was it like to make the transition virtually? Was there a different, was the knowledge different, right? And how people were participating, and what did it feel like?
Well, I'm a member of EO, which is called Entrepreneurs Organization. And one of the big mantras there is get naked fast. And so what I found is in person, you're in a room and people were opening up and there was more camaraderie, I would say. But online, I don't even use Zoom. I'm like so zoomed out, and I use it professionally, but I used a startup right there in the city in New York called Circles, CIRCL.ES.
Ooh.
Okay, so this is the best story ever. I know we're going to probably go on forever today, but
this is so great. Like already, I'm just so happy. I knew that we were going to learn some cool stuff here with you, Meredith.
So I'm demoing, Tina, I'm demoing Circles, and this is a startup in New York, okay? Because my a client of mine who's a member of YPO, which is another big entrepreneur organization, she's like, you got to go try Circles. Our accountability group uses it. And I'm like, okay. So I do the demo on Circles. So most people on your podcast aren't going to know me, but they will by the end of this. Like, I'm the only capitalist on this call. It's like guidance counselors and like first grade teachers. And the whole point of Circles is you're put in this circle and it provides sort of greater intimacy in the conversations. And you can pass the talking stick, and the person with the talking stick gets in the middle of the circle.
That is so cool.
Right. So for like an accountability group or for my luncheon, it's perfect. So with how I've addressed the questions and by going first and being really vulnerable and talking about my background and my goals, what I hit and what I didn't, and where I'm going, people learn stuff about me very quickly and I get naked fast. And it enables these other senior leaders who are usually going to be closed off to the normal person because they see themselves among peers. They're willing to be really super open, and it's really flipping cool.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question, actually. For someone to get naked fast, let's face it, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for everyone. Vulnerability is something that you have to train yourself to do. It's not easy. Is there a detriment, right? Is there a risk specifically to women to get themselves naked in front of peers?
Yes, there is. I think what I came to, it was about the time I started getting comfortable with the niche that there were going to be people that weren't drawn to it, and they're either going to like you or they're not. And while 5 years ago, I'm too caught up with what other people think, and to some degree, I still am. But I just had to be like, okay, you know what? If I'm not for somebody, that's okay. But to get comfortable, but I'm going to be most effective with people like you and I, like you said. I mean, before we first talked, I followed you on LinkedIn because I saw the good work that you were doing and I was watching what you were doing. But until you get to know somebody, you either click or you don't.
Right.
But the reason that luncheon works is I go first and I put it out there, and there's almost like peer pressure to open up more. I mean, there were women that talked about their alcoholic husbands. I mean, like it went really, I mean, these are all like vice presidents, senior vice presidents, C-suites of major Fortune 500s and heads of major big nonprofits in Atlanta and part of government. But the other thing is you'll find because they see their peers doing it, they're more willing to do it. I think the one thing I need to make a tweak, because I get questions about this, is just making sure people know that this is a safe place and that everything is held in confidence.
Right.
In those luncheons, which I've reiterated it in the middle, but by going first, I've tried to create an environment where people can connect and really get to know somebody at a deeper level. Do I think that's going to work as much in a live environment? I don't know yet. Because in the first couple we did before the pandemic, we did a little bit, but I've seen with the virtual creating an environment to do it more quickly.
Yeah. It seems like I myself am more likely to share something because I feel like there's at least a little bit of a barrier virtually, and this whole circle thing also reminds me of the new app, the new social networking Clubhouse, where you can literally just walk into a room, people are talking about whatever. And certainly if you want to talk in that room, you may or may not have the luxury or even be able to do it. But I think hearing just regular conversations, we all want to be back in caveman days where there's the fire, what are people talking about, and just sitting by the fire and just storytelling.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and we want something different. And I think this pandemic has just opened up so many ideas from even a sociological standpoint, how to connect in more meaningful ways. But the luncheons, it's become a passion project every bit as much as it could be, biz dev, but there's a longer run time to see ROI from a business development standpoint on it.
And now you started your business in 1999, right? Your what's now Artisan Financial Partners. I do want to mention too, you have some alphabet soup after your names. And these are questions that, I'd like to make sure that we go over them while we're on the podcast, because, there are a lot of women who are vetting different financial advisors, and that they should know that, first of all, the rigor of gaining these certifications,
and that they are indeed a separator and an indication that there is a core competency and a specialization.
Yeah, I'm going to actually jump in on the designation thing, and I'm not going to disagree with anything that you said. And this is going to be, it's going to make a couple of FPA people's heads spin when I say this. So I will tell you, among advisor peers, I always get told that I'm the most analytical, technical person. But yet my office knows that I'm able to do that, but be very high level, because that's how we have to operate in front of clients. So while I have these designations, I don't have my CFP. And a lot of people, we can go into why I don't have my CFP. Again, there's all sorts of political ramifications there, but I'm happy to discuss it. And I'm happy to discuss these designations. But I think the why on why I have these designations and not my CFP is also a very relevant thing to discuss.
Well, let's take it there. We're going to go right in here. Here we go. Start up the engines.
Yeah, sure. So very early on, I did these two designations, the LUTCF, which is primarily in the life insurance world. It stands for Life Underwriting Training Council Fellow. There's a lot of, I would say, estate planning and more business succession. Frankly, it was a very easy designation. I got that very, very early in my career. And then subsequently, I did the CLTC, which is a certification in long-term care. Those two things aren't necessarily my passion. It was primarily out of ease at that time, 15, 20 years ago. And the reason that I didn't do my CFP has to do with my story. In 2005, I was diagnosed with brain cancer, only 6 weeks after having my son. And if you figure in the industry, I'd been doing well, all the typical awards that everybody gets early on, like Rookie of the Year and, Agent of the Year, all that kind of stuff. So I had this trajectory, and then I got sick. And I was like, shit, I'm supposed to do the CFP. I should have probably started earlier. And now I'm like, okay, where do I get ROI? Am I going to get return on investment of the CFP, or am I going to get return on investment in understanding practice management cold? And so all the way back to like 2002, 2003, even in 2005, after I got sick, I just read everything around practice management. I was reading your BFF, Stephanie Bogan, before she was even a big thing. I was reading Angie Herber's before she was a big thing. I read all of that because remember, they're awesome. They are some of my mentors. They don't even know it. But I incessantly read all of their stuff because I identify first as a business owner and then as an advisor. And so I learned all this practice management stuff. And now I'm at a point in my career, I even vet this with Coach Joe. Like, I guess I could go back and do my CFP. I mean, we have a very technical concierge practice, and that's where the FPA people tend to get certain opinions around it, but it's like, I don't really need to.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the practice, because I think that also not only is your origin story, and I don't want to treat the fact that you had brain cancer casually. I want to pause here to reflect and just tell you that, number one, that I'm glad that you're okay. And that I look at you as really, you were extremely smart, and you are a fighter, and there's nothing that you can't do because you've been through hell and back. So thank you for sharing that with our audience, right? Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for being open.
Well, and to take that to another level, because I used to give keynotes in advisory all over the country, because it was the same diagnosis that Ted Kennedy and John McCain had. So it was a glioblastoma. And so there's very, very, very few, did I say very few, of us that are still alive. And I'm 16 years out in June, and I've never had a recurrence. So that, I think that gives me, I've had clients say this, it gives me a perspective on risk that most advisors are just simply not going to have. It's also of note that my mom died when I was in the middle of chemotherapy. I had three brain surgeries. One of my craniotomies was awake at Duke University. I did a lifetime dose of radiation to my brain. Try having a lifetime dose of frying of your brain. And I did a year of chemotherapy, and I worked through the whole thing. My mom died when I was in the middle of chemotherapy, and then I got divorced about 9 months after that. So, people want to come after me with, she doesn't have her CFP and she whatever, like, I'm like, bring it. Like, I am the poster child for adversity and overcoming it. So, but that was all back in 2005 to 2008, happened in a very short period of time. And that's why I gave a lot of keynotes, but as I mentioned, but what happened, was I started disconnecting from the message. I found that I felt like I was a monkey on the stage that people wanted to see perform or wanted to see essentially cry. And I am not a victim of anything. Absolutely. And, and look, the business is a metaphor. The business is a platform that I was able to use to help me get through stuff. And I'm obsessive about what I do and the business and, working with clients and frankly, running the business back to being a fangirl of Herbers and Bogan.
Yeah. And it was funny because I was on the call. I talked to Brandon Moss, who works for Herbers last week. I literally on the phone, and I said, Brandon, I'd love to have Angie on the podcast. And he's like, yeah, she'd love to do it. So, watch for it. I'm telling you, this second season is just going to be gangbusters. And Angie and Stephanie are pioneers in this industry who both have incredible life origin stories, right? So I love it that, you're touching on a really, really important thing. And that is that, we come to this industry as people with stuff and that we've got all kinds of life situations. And we look at it in the face and we say, oh yeah, you know what? We are still here. Hey, listeners, you can now text me at 201-581-3983 to join our community in the suite. After you do that, I'll be lifting you up, inspiring you, and supercharging your life and your career with awesome quotes, resources, videos, and tips we learn from our great guests. It couldn't be any easier. Just text 201-581-3983. I would love to talk a little bit about your practice because I find that this is one of the things that you and I touched upon the last conversation, and it goes along the lines of mentoring. It goes along the lines of inclusivity. And what does a team look like, right? If we're going to build teams in 2021, right? And we are here to, what did you say in the beginning? Reinvent the wheel. There it is. Reinvent the wheel. How do we reinvent the wheel? What's your approach to reinventing the wheel right now with your practice? Artisan Financial Strategies, and you're in Alpharetta. Talk to us a little bit about, the decision to rebrand and now what the team looks like and where your ethos is as a business leader.
Right. So, and I first learned about what I call the Valley of Death from Angie Herbers, but like I mentioned, I'm also a member of Entrepreneurs Organization EO. It's commonly coined there too. So I don't know that I'm going to get the numbers exactly right. I still remember the article that Angie wrote. It's somewhere between about 650, 700 and 1.2 million in revenue and financial advisory. And you get to this point and it's very hard to scale. And so I was for years, as I was supposed to be, and this is audio, so I'm air quoting, like I lived my whole life doing what I was supposed to be doing. And so I branded under Moore & Associates Wealth Management, blah, blah, blah. And then I come against a wall and I'm like, I can't, as the only producing advisor, and I had a lot of support staff, because of the concierge aspect, where we're doing a lot more than just running money. In a true planning practice like what I have, where 95% of people come in and pay a financial planning fee. It's the margins are a lot thinner. They're just a lot thinner than all my friends that all they're doing is managing assets and maybe do a plan as sort of a one-off. And I know that. But I figured out with that model, I couldn't scale by myself. I was going to be capped. Yeah. And so I became a member of EO because I was trying to scale up and figure out how to do this. And I'm like, I need people other than myself. I didn't want to be some sort of, massive shop. That was never my vision. My vision still remains to have, somewhere between 2 to 4 really good advisors, where it's like a law firm. Everybody has their specialty, and we can create shared resources and support staff. And so that's when I went about the rebrand. But the rebrand culminated also with a lot of the stuff, as we talked about with Dory Clark, as I really developed this niche. Then I hired, why am I blanking on her name? Out in San Francisco. I'm going to remember her name. She's going to kill me for forgetting. We're going to come back to that. And she helped.
Because we're human, that's why. Because we're human. We've got all kinds of screens in front of us. We've got notes. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here. It's the middle of the week, right? It's because we are human. Exactly.
So it started with the rebrand. I knew I needed to change my name, but I needed to do the rebrand to determine the name.
Right.
But I had been mentoring another advisor for a number of years. And in fact, internal to New York Life, I taught a practice management class for younger advisors. They had to pay. In fact, there was an article written about this in US News and World Report. That mentorship practice management course was my version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I built a very robust curriculum that I knew I would weed out people that couldn't hang. And my rule was, if you showed up late, you were kicked out. Punctuality is a thing I have. So
right. Yeah. I got the text message from Meredith, like, hey, I'm on. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm reading my questions. Like, I would be on too. One of the things like I learned is if I'm on, then we start conversing, and then I can't do my last, read all my notes like at the last minute. So sorry, I just had to put that segue in.
No,
there.
You're good.
You're so good.
It's so annoying. I know about myself.
That's the thing, right? So yep. Meredith would have been like, nope, not going on the podcast if Tina showed up late.
No, but I would, if somebody was late, they were kicked out. I did this deliberately. I was a jerk on purpose because I felt like I can't teach mindset. You can teach the technical side of advisory, back to why people do the CFP. And I need people to be on time, and I need them to do their work. So I would have them listen to podcasts, industry podcasts, by the way, and read certain articles. Like they were reading everything Bogan and Herbers had written. Like that was like their homework. Reading the Nick Murray newsletter, stuff like that, so they could start to understand not just behavioral finance, but the practice management side. Because this is my opinion, the industry does a very, very poor job in teaching advisors to understand the business side. And again, that's where my passion is. So that was the nature of the course. It was practice management. And of course, some people couldn't hang. And in the end, the last person standing was my Charlie, back to the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory metaphor there. So Adam Tolliver was the last person standing. And it in answer to your earlier question, like we're very pro diversity and inclusion, but it just happened to me to be that Adam is a millennial Black male. And in my office, we don't judge that because we're an ACC office. Not that I even really like football, dare I say that, especially in the South. I went to Georgia Tech. My chief operating officer, Sandy Jones, is an Indian woman who went to Clemson. By the way, she has a civil engineering degree.
This is so cool. What was it with Adam, back to Angela Duckworth's book on grit, right? A lot of us want the Adams in the world to come to join our team and work with us. Where do you think that grit comes from? Is it made? Is it born? Why was he the Charlie?
I think it has to do with how somebody, what they're interested in the industry. And I had structured that class very deliberately where it was around a lot of the business side. And look, if somebody wants, if it's all about cash flow, I get it. Like that's a big thing. But back to, if I'm going to have sustainability in this industry and if people I work with have sustainability, we need to make it fun and have passion around what we're doing too, because I'm not looking to retire or exit out at some sort of metaphorical age. And so it's about sustainability. And so that's how I taught the class, was around the business side. Yes, there was some technical, but the technical wasn't around figuring out standard deviations and alpha on portfolios.
Right.
It was understanding the business at a higher level. And most of the institutions that people affiliate with, again, they're not leading with the business side, the practice management side. And, that's my personal opinion. I just think that's really, really important. And back to, I can hire a CFP, but I'm going to we have arguably two analytical women that run this office.
Right.
We figure stuff out pretty quickly. It doesn't take long, but I'm back to, how do we identify people like Adam, like myself? I don't know the answer to that. I think it's both learned and, we're born with it. I didn't enjoy doing my engineering degree. In fact, I have a video that I think I might have sent you. I had the privilege of, I graduated right near the top of my class in high school. I had the privilege of failing thermodynamics, not just once, Tina. I failed it twice. I really went for the win on that one. So there are certain things, that I'm not good at. But I think in business, we hire to those blind spots, to those weaknesses. And I don't know the answer, like how to find the atoms. Look, I taught my class. I thought I would see how people were made. And, I know we're all looking. I'm trying to find more advisors as we speak. And so I'm in the process of building out a core process around that. And, and talking to some people, it's a little gut and it's a little bit around experience. But I think there's a subjective, intangible side that, you got to take a little bit of risk on guessing that that's how that person's going to be wired.
Yeah. Is that an in-person position or a
No,
virtual
it's not. And as I'm scaling up above and beyond Adam, I'm trying to figure out, we want, again, I use Die Hard because of EO. We use Traction.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Gene, what's his last name? I want to say Hackman because that's the name that follows after G, but that's not Hackman. But is his first name Gene, who wrote the book?
It's Gino.
Okay, Gino. Yes, love that. God, there are so many documents in that book. Is a masterclass in itself.
It is, and the only way I found. It's part of EO in my accountability group. So there's Vern Hamish's Scaling Up, and then there's Gino Wickman's EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. And that is a game changer in our business because it's given structure to the team meetings, to meeting cadence, to creating more clarity around goals and where we're going. I cannot recommend enough for every entrepreneur, and especially every advisor, is to look at how to adopt it. We adopted it very slowly. We did our first annual plan in November using their system. And the way I learn is I like to dig in and DIY it the first time before I start bringing in consultants.
Right.
And then we had just replaced our CFO, and the new fractional CFO we hired, they're diehard EOS. So they've helped come in and allowed us to even improve. So it's created an operating system to run the business off of.
You think that it's necessary if you're going to get to that level of efficiency within your business? Do you think that it's necessary? Can you get away with doing the work on your own? Kind of,
I don't, like, again, I'm all about DIYing. What I found was it wasn't just traction. There's a company book called Get a Grip, which has a real life case study of a very dysfunctional team, essentially, not an advisory, that really kind of role plays an EOS implementer, bringing them through not just what they call the L10, which is the weekly team meeting, but the quarterly and the annual meeting. And what's also been really pivotal for me is there's software that's all web-based called 90, like spelled it out, 90, that I'm able to run the whole system on. It creates the dashboard. We decide the KPIs. Every team member can put stuff on there. Issues go on there. It creates the agenda. And that's been a game changer for our practice this past year.
That is really, really cool. The question that's rising for me at the top is that what does Meredith Moore's tech stack look like? We've heard Circle, we've heard 90, right? We've heard the EOS operating system is this 90?
It's a philosophy. Yeah, 90
okay,
does
right.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so the 90 does that. I'm familiar with OKRs, right? Yep. The Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And then that has like the OKR framework has also too a software. But what's another like great recommendation? You seem to be really like utilizing some really cutting edge tools here.
So on the business side, I'd say 90. I found that that's all we need. Like I'm because it aligns, it addresses issues, it addresses back to the KPIs, the OKRs, whatever we want to call it. It houses to-dos, and I have like 4 different teams. So I have my marketing team, I have the advisory team, we have our leadership team, and it helps with the meeting cadence. It stores all those issues and those to-dos and those dashboards internal to those teams. But in answer to your question on my tech stack, again, probably like a lot of folks that you've had on here in advisory, we're power users of eMoney. We use Redtail. Certainly we have proprietary stuff internal to New York Life. I'm not a big user of it. I use Redtail more to run the CRM, to run the business.
Yeah. We use Redtail here too. Big shout out to Brian McLaughlin and Redtail. We love it.
Yeah, I think I have like 5 or 6 people internal to New York Life that keep coming to me on Redtail because I was the first person to do it. So good, bad, or indifferent.
No surprise there, Meredith. No surprise.
Yeah, I'm an early engager, an early adopter, if you will, which is interesting given my regulatory climate that I'm specifically in. So, but I've learned for advisory out there that everybody complains all the time about compliance. Nobody has tougher compliance than me, but politically, I've made friends. I've made it my mission to understand the risk mitigation and the why so that I can negotiate and have meaningful conversations where they can get done what they need to get done and I can get done what I need to get done.
It's so interesting that you say that because I had a discussion around a C-level female in a new organization. And so we're looking at social media, through the lens, and they've been there's been a lot of trepidation there. Chief compliance officer is a great person and, wants to do right and all of that. But at the same time, there's certain things that are not instituted across the firm. And I find a lot of it is just, it goes back to running an efficient business and it goes back to having standard operating procedures, and what they do for one person then has to be okay for everyone. And that a lot of times that something isn't part of an organization's course process around social media because they haven't really addressed the framework of education, a policy, and even just documentation and how they're going to store that. So,
well, and think about it like this: the larger the organization, and again, I have an affiliation with a Fortune 100. So when you have thousands upon thousands of advisors or agents that are operating at completely different levels, have a very different practice than 95% of everybody else, how do you standardize? How do you create a core process or a standard operating procedure, an SOP for one whole business unit? And, kudos to senior leadership at New York Life. And by the way, politically, I sit on the Agents Advisory Council. So I run for that. I was elected by my peers and I had the technology committee. I do that in the effort of service, but also self-serving. It allows me to create relationships and back to understand their why. I mean, they're not just like telling you no for the sake of saying no.
Right.
So, become friends with the GC of a Fortune 100, know who reports to them and what boxes they have to check for the sniff test to make something work, and then have the conversation. And most people just aren't willing to do that. It's back to the grind of the business. Focus on seeing more people. I shouldn't have to do that. Let's complain about it.
Yeah, right. Let's be more solution oriented than problem oriented. But to your point too, Meredith, to be understanding around, why that person, there's a reason that person is going in that direction to begin with, and that there's a policy that's there.
Right.
So good. It's a good reminder, and it's a good reminder to all of us to make friends in the organization throughout, and to have a little bit of a deeper understanding of the other person and why things might be a certain way, which I think is always really good advice. I want to also talk about some of your research. Wouldn't want to leave this out of today's conversation, because it was another reason that I brought you in, dealing with the female breadwinners, having an understanding of, what women go through from so many different angles, from the planning aspect of it, the financial advisory aspect of it, and then just being just a woman and having to go through it. What you've gone through was just incredible, struggles and perseverance. And you've done some research around the intersection of gender and money and power, and how that impacts personal relationships in the 21st century. So I thought maybe you could pull in some tidbits. Of course, we're going to have a whole bunch of resources. What were some of the key insights that we should know as women as a result of your research?
So back to a la Dory Clark with deciding this niche, understand that anecdotally, I'd been working with a lot of women in senior leadership. And you and I both know there are 1,000 advisors that work with women and money. There are. But nobody knows women breadwinners like I do. And it's because, not just because of anecdotal experience, because some people have a lot of that. What I did was I went out and I interviewed the only thing that I could find out there were primarily from academics. And literally, we sat in my conference room with a couple of my other marketing folks. We had scoured for every dissertation, any published piece that had been written on this, and we were categorizing it. And then I sought to go out and do interviews with these people. It was very interesting. It's somewhat funny because there's a gal, Sasha Kilowald's up at Harvard, and she's done a lot around this. And she's probably 18 years younger than me, 20 years younger than I am. And she wouldn't give me an interview. I was dealing with her TA, and her TA's Professor Kilowald just doesn't have time. And I'm used to in my industry, I can get through to somebody pretty quick. And, but I interviewed Sasha, interviewed Yang Hu, who's in Lancaster, England, interviewed a gal in Australia, and all the interviews are on my website, actually, around the research that they had done. And I started compiling everything together and ultimately pulled my anecdotal experiences along with the research we're finding into a white paper that I wrote. That was pretty extensive. And Investment News had picked up on this and done some stuff. And another one of my, we got good mentions in Investment News around that. So I was pleased with that. But if I'm going to break down like some key takeaways that always get people's attention, basically the sociologists believe that there are two main indicators of equality in a marriage. And this is what blows people away. One is like how cash flow is managed internal to the house. You have what I call like the independent model, which is like his and hers. And sometimes you have models where everybody pulls everything together. Majority of what I see professionally are what I call partial pooling. There's his, hers, and ours. And that tends to be sort of, this is not according to Meredith, this is according to the sociologists. That's the bigger indicator for equality in a marriage, is basically around how you pool cash flow. And
his, hers, and ours would be the ideal model. It sounds like, because you've got autonomy from both sides, right? A level of control, and partial pulling, but not altogether pulling.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. The other thing that's very, very interesting is that even when she's making more money, even 20% more, she tends to still do the bulk of the housework. So the housework issue is still the other marriage equality indicator that sociologists use. So I'm like, who's vacuuming and how does that get assigned? The other interesting thing that I did through this is I literally built out every bit of history around women and money as far back as I could go. And I have a whole timeline and animation timeline on this. And what was absolutely fascinating to me, and I've had several clients reiterate that this was their experience as well, as early as the 80s, a lot of women had to get a male to co-sign a business loan, even a minor child. And, could be a business partner, could be a spouse. But if somebody didn't, I have two clients who didn't have either. And so they had to get a minor son to co-sign the loan. And, I use the history as context to understand why we are where we are. And look, there's a lot of women that lead their families around the financials. So I'm not discounting that. But the other fact that I found very interesting is the label breadwinner.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I'm so glad you were going there, because I was going to say, what is the criteria for being labeled that, in a marriage or in a relationship, are using the 20% threshold, 20% over what he or she makes?
I think it's all based on the family with how they define that. What I do know is there was a study where if she makes 80% more, that is that nobody likes that term, and women like it even less than men. Because, and this is my theory, again, this is not the sociologist, and this is more anecdotally, I think because of history and how maybe our mothers, what their role was with money, we associate, again, gender with who handles the money. Again, not always true, but I see that over and over again. And it speaks back to even engagements that I have. Men are more willing to make decisions without their spouse, where women, I don't care how much money they make, they always want to bring in their spouse to where it's more collaborative. So I think there's like a gender role thing here at play, and nobody wants to talk about that is kind of my belief. But a lot of what I do, because I work with the space a lot, is it's not counseling per se, but it's helping get to where they need to get together. Because you can have situations, like I have some female physicians that have more debt, but have more income than their spouse. And their male spouse might have restricted stock at a tech company, and not have the income. So it's how to have these conversations. There's so much shame, as we know, around money. And it's really breaking that down to where how do we have this conversation and kind of take whatever role of power inside that relationship a little bit away?
One of the things that I found too from just being in a relationship, being in my first marriage, is that it wasn't necessarily my husband that was holding me back. It was me that was holding me back. And so I felt very insecure in my own skin about having a meeting. I remember right after I gave birth, actually, someone sold us a whole life policy, which was, I don't know how you feel about it, but I felt like it wasn't necessarily the right thing for us to be doing back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember hey, having like, just kind of being thrown into it. And all I could really think about was, breastfeeding and everything else that was going on. So, I think that the men in our life really want to be supportive, and the women in our life and the people in our life.
Yep.
And that it is, if you could take one thing away from this podcast today, and that is that, have a conversation around money with your financial advisor. If you're already in a relationship with a financial advisor, great. Financial advisors are operating virtually now. Make it a point to be there in the meeting. If you can't, make it virtually. If you can't make it to there, record. This can actually be a fun and an interesting process, especially if you have an advisor like Meredith too, who will, advise you on all kinds of other cool things. But it is really discussions around your entire life, your relationships. It's not just having conversations about your money. Money is a byproduct of all the other decisions that you're making in your life. So with that said, is there something that you would recommend that, again, you see over and over, tripping people up, tripping women up, especially one piece of advice that you would recommend for that woman listening right now that, hey, it's 2021 and you're their Dory Clark. So let's change their year with a great piece of advice.
So I'm hoping we've got a lot of goal-oriented people on here. So based upon where you want to go, who do you need to be? Who do you need to become? What skills do you need to learn? Again, took AP English, but I never thought in this industry that I'd be writing as much as I do. I've always been able to speak okay, but I never thought I'd be speaking as much, but be a financial advisor, do a lot of bigger public speaking. And so in order for me, 10 years ago, I sat down with where I wanted to go. I'm like, what skills do I need to acquire to become that person? And really start working on them systematically. In fact, every quarter, I have a new skill that I'm working on. Right now, I'll share my quarterly skill. I'm reading the book Necessary Endings, which is really fascinating. I think there's so many business and personal things that I should have ended earlier, but didn't have the guts to do it. And so I'm really thinking, and I'm journaling a lot about that as I read this book, as sort of a quarterly skill set that I'm trying to get better at. So with where I want to go. So that's my advice is, what skills do you need to acquire with who you want to become?
That is really, really fantastic advice. And I love the way that you broke it down and then got that book recommendation in there too, Meredith. Necessary Endings. It sounds really like, it sounds like a very, very cool book.
Yeah.
Right? The premise of the book, just saying no to, saying, okay, that's not working. Move on to the next. We put ourselves in situations that, boy, we spent way too much time there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think as women, we probably do it even more so. We're afraid to say no.
Yeah. We're afraid of saying no, being disappointing ourselves, and also too not feeling ready for things, right? It was a text message that I got just the other day. Again, a client just asking advice on something. And I felt like, she already in her gut said, well, no, I think I should actually say no to that. And so we looked at the situation and we said, actually, yeah, saying no to that is actually saying yes to you and putting yourself again in a position of power, because she didn't have a lot of things that she needed in order to say yes. So we're gonna make sure that book recommendation is out. Also, too, tell us the best way for people to get in touch with you. Financial Girl on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen, here, gotta follow Meredith Moore, and she's also too, as you would expect, on LinkedIn. But what are the best ways for people to follow your work right now, get in touch with you?
I'm sure even too that we have a lot of questions from the audience as well.
Sure. So my website is not ideal, not the physical website. The address is not ideal, but it's artisan, not artesian, because artesians are for wells, but artisan is ARTISANFS, like financial strategy online.com. And people can also email me at mmoore@artisanfsonline.com. I tend to post the articles on LinkedIn. So if you're following me there, I'm pretty easy to find. And if you happen to have a Medium subscription, pretty easy to find me there and all of my past work. I know Michael Kitces has picked up several of my Medium articles as well.
That's so great. Well, Meredith Moore, it has been a delight. I cannot wait to see you in person. We're getting very close to that. I imagine that it's going to be sometime in 2021 here.
I think so too.
Right. Thank you so much for just empowering us today. We've had a wonderful time here in the suite. We've learned so much from you. Keep on doing what you're doing. And we just I feel totally blessed to call you friend and to have had this discussion with you in the suite. And there's anything that you ever need, just Meredith Moore, just keep on the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Tina Powell. Thank you for spending time with me today. And it was great to catch up.
You're listening to In the Suite, a podcast that shares amazing stories of women in business in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Our producers are Tina Powell and Kevin Hirshorn. Our editor at large is Kevin Hirshorn. Our content writers are Carmen Barner and Tina Powell and Sarah Smirker. Our research and technical assistants are Rachel Powell and Kimmy Rice. In the Suite podcast is sponsored by C-Suite Social Media, a digital marketing and social media agency for C-Suite leaders and companies in finance and technology. You can visit csuitesocialmedia.com to learn more. And thank you so much for listening and subscribing and giving us 5-star reviews. We are so grateful to you. Thank you so much. We've got listeners in 589 cities and 37 countries. This podcast was inspired and created for you ladies. So please let us know how you enjoyed this amazing episode with Meredith Moore and share your thoughts on LinkedIn and Twitter, #InTheSuite. You can connect with her on Twitter at Financial Girl and LinkedIn Meredith Moore, and visit her at www.artisanfsonline.com. And always, if you would like to share the name of a rock star woman in financial services we should interview in 2021, please send it to me at tina@inthesuitepodcast.com. Again, thank you so much for listening and subscribing to In the Suite.